So, what happens when Mopar builds an automatic transmission that's so tough, it survives Hemis, drag racing, and hauling RVs across the country without even flinching? You get the 727 TorqueFlite. This thing isn't just some old Chrysler trans. It's one of the most respected automatics ever built. It's simple, tough, and if you're a Mopar guy, you've probably got a 727 story already. Today we're breaking down how the 727 became Mopar's secret weapon, how it stacked up against the TH400 and the C6, and why gearheads are still running them today. And stick around, because halfway through, I'll tell you about the drag racing trick that made the 727 a killer at the strip. Part 1. The birth of the 727 TorqueFlite. Alright, let's go back to the early 60s. Mopar was throwing down with big block engines, stuff like the 413 Max Wedge, the 426 Wedge, and of course the 426 Hemi. Problem was, the old transmissions couldn't hang. The cast iron A466 TorqueFlite was strong, but it was a boat anchor. So in 1962, Chrysler rolled out something new, the A727 TorqueFlite. This was a 3-speed automatic, but it wasn't just an update. It was a whole new deal. The 727 had an aluminum case, so it was lighter than the old iron boxes, and even lighter than the TH400. But don't let the weight fool you. This thing was built to take a beating. Why was it special? The 727 was the first mass-produced automatic that let multiple clutch packs engage at the same time. That basically meant smoother shifts, less slip, and more strength. Here's the gear spread. First gear, 2.45 to 1. Second gear, 1.45 to 1. Third gear, 1 to 1 direct. Reverse, 2.21 to 1. Chrysler slapped these things behind pretty much everything. Hemi Chargers and Roadrunners, 440-powered Darts and Coronets, trucks, vans, even RVs. And yeah, AMC cars too, when Chrysler started supplying them with transmissions in the 70s and early 80s. Here's something most people don't think about. The 727 wasn't just a race car trans. It was the backbone of RVs. I'm talking big block Class A motorhomes in the 70s and 80s, running 727s with 440s in front of them. Imagine pulling a 12,000-pound brick up a mountain in the middle of summer, and the transmission doesn't even blink. And if you've ever driven one of those old Mopar RVs, or watched someone wrestle one around, you know how brutal that is on a drivetrain. Brakes overheat, engines get hot. But the 727? It just shifts. That's why these transmissions earned their reputation with real-world miles, not just on paper. That's why RV builders stuck with the 727. It could tow all day without cooking itself. Part 2. What makes the 727 a tank? So why was the 727 TorqueFlite so bulletproof? Here's the deal. The 727 kept things mechanical. No vacuum lines, no electronics, just throttle linkage, governor pressure, and good old-fashioned hydraulics. Aluminum case, lighter than the competition but still tough as nails. 3 planetary gear sets. That spreads out the load, so it doesn't eat itself under torque. Low inertia internals. That's just a fancy way of saying it's efficient and reacts fast. And that simultaneous clutch engagement I mentioned? That's what gave it those smooth, solid shifts. Working on one? If you've ever rebuilt a transmission, you know some of them are a nightmare. But the 727 is simple to tear down and put back together. Parts are cheap, and the aftermarket's been there since the 80s, so you can build one in your garage, no problem. Most people talk about the power glide when it comes to drag racing. But back in the 60s and 70s, Mopar guys were building 727s for the strip. Why? Because a stock 727 could handle 500 to 600 horsepower right out of the gate. And with a few tweaks, you're good for a lot more. Slap on a manual valve body, and you've got yourself a clutchless race trans. No soft shifts, no lag, just bang, bang, bang through the gears. And here's the funny part. You don't always need a trans brake. A 727 with a good converter and manual control can launch hard enough to scare you. That's why you still see these things at bracket races and nostalgia drag meets. Part 3. How it stacked up. Let's call it like it is. GM had the TH400. Ford had the C6. Mopar had the 727. So how'd they compare? Weight-wise, the 727 was the lightest of the three. And that matters more than people think. A lighter transmission means less rotating mass, quicker shifts, and less parasitic drag. That's why Mopar guys would argue the 727 felt sharper off the line, even in stock form. Strength-wise, it held its own. It handled Hemis, 440s, and even towing duty in trucks and RVs. And when the other guys started talking about overdrive, Mopar stuck with the 727 all the way until 1991, before they finally upgraded it into the A518. Now here's a twist most folks forget. In the 70s, AMC started buying 727s from Chrysler for their Jeeps and muscle cars. So if you've got an old AMC Javelin, AMX, or Jeep Wagoneer, there's a good chance it's running a Mopar Trans. Oh, and get this. NASCAR tested the 727 TorqueFlite for a short time during the automatic transmission experiments in the late 60s. They didn't race with it. Long-term manuals dominated the era. But the fact they trusted the 727 for high-speed oval testing says everything about its reliability. And as for AMC, using Chrysler's Trans was a game-changer. It brought Mopar toughness to Jeeps and muscle cars that would have otherwise been stuck with weaker automatics. It didn't stick, but the fact that it even made it onto a NASCAR track says a lot. Part 4. Why the 727 still matters. The 727 TorqueFlite stayed in production from 1962 to 1991. That's almost 30 years of muscle cars, trucks, and RVs running the same basic design. And yeah, they replaced it with the A518 overdrive later on. But plenty of Mopar guys will tell you, if you're building something to last, they'd rather have a 727. Today, the 727 isn't just some museum piece collecting dust. You'll still find these things everywhere. At the junkyard, sitting under an old Dodge truck with grass growing through the frame. Most people walk right past it, but a gearhead knows that's a transmission you can pull, clean up, and have back on the road in a weekend. You'll see them at the drag strip too, usually under a classic Mopar running tens, still banging gears with a manual valve body and a converter swap. Then there's the truck guys. Plenty of folks are still stuffing 440 big blocks into old Dodge pickups, and when they do, 9 times out of 10, they're running a 727 behind it. Why? Because it works, and it always has. And let's not forget the hot rod crowd. If you're building something that's supposed to look good, but also take a beating, a 727 TorqueFlite is an easy call. It's simple, it's proven, and it'll survive whatever you throw at it. Once you build one right, a 727 will outlive the car it's in. That's just the facts. It's also why you still see them in weird places. Rock crawlers, mud trucks, even old-school monster trucks. If you need a transmission that won't argue, the 727 is the one you call. Look, when it comes to legendary automatics from the 60s and 70s, there's really 3 names. The TH400, the C6, and the 727 TorqueFlite. But while the other 2 get all the headlines, the 727 is the one that quietly did it all. From muscle cars to RVs, drag strips to mountain passes. And it's still out there, shifting away,